Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to this session. We're here today to talk about the internet for all, about accessibility, equality, diversity, and as it applies to all of us, how we extend usage in an increasingly effective way. But before I get into the Q&A, I thought I'd just introduce the panel. Starting here on my left, Rish Lotlaka, who is the CEO and founder of Superworld. Rish was recently, I think, voted or chosen as one of the 30 most important people in the metaverse. But we're fortunate to have him here in person today. It's really great to meet you, and we very much look forward to your comments. Ricky Corker, who is the Chief Customer Experience Officer at Nokia. Nokia is a business that needs no introduction. I confess to having some connected history with his company, so I have a particular fondness here. Nokia is absolutely at the cutting edge of technology innovation, particularly in 5G, and interestingly beginning to look at the foundations for 6G, which maybe we might get into when we meet. Ricky, it's very nice to have you here. Alla Malki, who needs no introduction to this audience, the Chief Technology Officer for the household name that is Mobily. I believe, Alla, you have been with Mobily since the early days, so you can tell us where all the mobile base stations are buried. And Mobily has been an extraordinary success as a business, and most recently in building an IoT network, which hopefully likewise we'll get into. But it's a great delight to have you, and thank you very much for joining us. And Ahmed Al-Fafi, who needs no introduction to members of the audience here in Saudi, I think began your career at the Saudi Ministry of Defense, yes, but have been a lifetime member of the IT community. Joined SAP probably longer ago than he'd like me to remind everybody, and has been responsible for leading the development of SAP's public cloud data centers, and also contributing to the extraordinary vision, the 2030 vision, that is very visible here in the kingdom. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you very much for joining. I have the privilege of giving a short speech later, but who would have thought 2 years ago, when we first had the idea for what is now LEAP, that we would be sitting here today having this sort of conversation about what does it mean to be connected. But I'm going to hazard a guess that every single person in this room is connected in most, if not all, of their life. In fact, it's possible, and I can't see because of the lights, that you may be spending more time connected now than perhaps those of us on the stage might want you to be. But not everybody in the world is connected. But back in 1989, when Tim Berners-Lee did the first successful communication between an HTTP client and a server, who would have thought the world would be as it is today, with more connectivity around the world, more users around the world, in many instances more smartphones around the world than there are people. It's been an extraordinary journey. I think today, I was looking at currencies this morning, that if you had 4 Saudi riyals in your pocket, you could buy $1 US today. But you would need 40,000 of those dollars to buy 1 Bitcoin today. So the metaverse, a word that I think was initially brought to us by a science fiction novel in the early 1990s, and has in the space of 2 or 3 years entered a world of development and innovation that you can see some examples of outside. Can the metaverse be a new frontier for accessibility and for connectivity? And what about on gender? The statistics say that women have lower usage rates and lower access rates. What about some parts of the world, like sub-Saharan Africa, where still less than half of the population are connected to the internet? So we, in this hall today, may feel that the internet is already for all, but is it as accessible as we would like it to? And how do we close those gaps? So Ricky, I thought I'd start with you on the question of gaps. How might we close the gaps, and how might you define what those gaps are, and where should we look to close them first?
Yeah, great question. So I think if I look at where the big gaps are, there's really three areas. Let's start with basic connectivity. I think Borio just spoke about this. You mentioned statistics. You know, the ITU estimates that today there's more than 3 billion people who are not online. UNICEF estimated that when COVID hit, there were 460 million students who could not connect remotely to an education facility. So basic connectivity, I think, is where it starts. So we have a lot of people out there not connected today. And that's where technology companies like Nokia play a key role. The reality is, and we have a lot of technologists in the room here, we have a fantastic toolkit of technologies. We have fixed networks, we have mobile networks, we have microwave, we have low orbit satellite systems, we have high altitude platform technologies. So we're constantly innovating, and now it's a question of how do we bring that innovation to really connect people. And that's not just about technology, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, because it's more than technology. It's the ecosystem, it's governments, it's regulations that go with that. The second point is really then around, if you do have connectivity, do you know how to use it? Can you get the benefits of it? So to your point around gender diversity, around age, I will give an example. So my mother, who lives in Australia on a remote farm, her only connection to the world is a satellite link. And she only was able to use that because we gave her an iPad. She has no PC literacy at all. But she now lives, that's her lifeline, right? So providing education, tools, local language content, being able to teach teachers how to teach their children and use those tools is really vitally important. And I would say the third point, the last point is, there are many places, and I will use the US, which is where I live, where we have connectivity, but it's simply not affordable. People don't have the ability to purchase those monthly data plans. And so even though they have access to connectivity, they simply don't have the ability to make that connection. So again, how do we make technology and those connections affordable? How do we work with governments and regulators to make that more accessible?
Am I allowed to ask you a quick supplementary?
Yes.
One of the speakers earlier, I think from another company you may know, Ericsson, talked about the importance of a progressive regulatory regime. Do you think countries are doing enough to focus on driving accessibility?
I think countries are trying, but I think it's just more than just the regulator. It's the regulators, it's the governments, it's technology companies together. I think one of the areas where regulators play a huge part, and particularly when we think about mobile technologies, is how do we break down some of the cost barriers for providing connectivity to more rural parts of the country. And spectrum, I think, is a great example, right? How do we break down the cost of spectrum? Many countries, governments and regulators charge massive sums of money to get access to that vital spectrum, which actually takes capital expenditure away from their ability to fund deployments in more rural areas. So I do believe regulators have an important role to play in breaking down some of those barriers.
Interesting, interesting. Well, on that note, Ala, you at Mobily, and I suspect you personally, have been really a pioneering innovator in driving take-up and participation both in original mobile and now in next-generation applications and connectivity. How are you looking at closing the gaps here in the kingdom?
Well, just to give us some comments on what you were saying about having the coverage and it's how difficult in the state. I mean, Saudi Arabia is a quite large country. It's 2 million square kilometers. That's 8 times the size of the UK. 8 times the size of the UK. And it has so many localities and villages, communities, with a small number of population, 5,000 population, 10,000 population, even 100. And I believe the Universal Services Fund that was supported by the government was the solution. And we were so glad that Mobily was the first operator who invested in those funds. And today, you can go in the middle of the desert and you can have a broadband experience, 10 meg in the desert. We saw how much this played a major role when it comes to the pandemic. And we saw how much this was a lifeline for people to have a connectivity. This is a great collaboration between the government and the private sectors. And we're really glad that we have such a network that works during that critical time.
And can I ask you a supplementary? Have you discovered that pricing is a way of approaching, I mean, I use the word rural. I'm not sure the English description of the word rural quite meets what you're dealing with. But has pricing been a big part of driving accessibility in remote areas?
Accessibility is, internet is needed for all, as I like the title of today. Everyone deserves to have the internet. It's become, there's no option not to have an internet. It's similar to the water, electricity.
Yep.
You can hardly forget your mobile phone when you get out. But what I want to say that when the infrastructure is there, this universal service started in 2010. We had a very clear vision that we want to have the connectivity everywhere from that time. Today we have even national roaming, where operators can roam in each other in those areas. Here we have to serve the people. It's not only a matter of competitions and pricing and all these kind of things. You need to provide the connectivity. It's a must. That's what I believe.
Very helpful. Rish, feel free to stay in the physical world, but if we could maybe turn to the virtual world. Is it different in the virtual world? There is no rural and urban. There is no desert in the virtual world. How should we begin to think about accessibility in Superworld?
Yeah, the metaverse really provides us with a new opportunity to visualize and interact with the world around us in immersive computing environments. And so, again, we can reimagine the world, whether it's architecture, whether it's geographies, topology, literally anything around us, and we can also go totally virtual in environments. Superworld, which is specifically the company that, again, I founded and I'm running as a CEO, is a virtual world mapped on top of on the real world. And so Superworld is all around us in the geographies that we live in, rural, urban, everywhere in the planet. And so you can go into virtual immersive environments wherever you are, in a city, whether you're in the countryside. Connectivity here is very important as well, even though once you have that connectivity, you can reimagine and create environments around you and create opportunities for anyone around the world to access those environments as if they're there. And that's a term called presence, when you can go into a virtual environment and for you it seems completely like reality. It's indistinguishable from your reality. And these are the really special benefits of the metaverse, as well as Web3 and blockchain technology gives us ownership of these environments and ownership of these assets that are being created all over the world.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you for a prediction, Rish.
Sure.
I don't know how many people here in the audience, but in 2007, I was at Mobile World Congress when the smartphone was launched. We were not predicting in 2007 that the world would be where it is in 2022. So, we're here in Riyadh in 2022. How long will it take before we all have a presence in the metaverse? Because every single person here has one of these. I'm going to take that bet. Every single person lives on one of these. Every single person does exactly what Alice says, is when they leave the house in the morning without their mobile phone, they go back home. So how long will it take before we all have a presence?
Yeah, so presence, again, is when you're fully immersed in virtual reality or augmented reality, and it feels, like I said, indistinguishable from real life. And so you can have presence in augmented reality, with a hologram if you're communicating with someone who's across the world and they enter your living room, or you can go into space, with a pair of VR goggles on. If you look at mobile phones, there's about 3.5 billion mobile phones that are AR enabled. So literally every new mobile phone is now augmented reality enabled. And that's why you saw the game Pokemon Go really grow so fast. It was the fastest growing company in history when it came out, and it's doing extremely well still. But the point is AR technology is pretty accessible with mobile phones. And as glasses come out, as the new form factor, Apple's spending a lot of money and resources on this, so is Facebook, so is Google, so companies around the world are really investing into the new form factor there. I'd say in the next 4 to 5 years, you're gonna find the price points on not only VR headsets continue to decline. Oculus Quest now is really reached critical mass in especially in the West and the US, and I think that will expand over the next 5 years. But you'll also see new form factor in terms of AR glasses, and that's going to come much faster because the mobile technology is using the same software, ARKit on iOS and AR Core on Android, which will be, again, the platform that will enable AR content to go onto the glasses.
So did I hear 2027?
Yeah, I'd say 2027 we'll find that, the mobile technology and glasses will be at a price point where I think you'll be making a decision whether you're buying a pair of glasses that come with your mobile phone or just maybe even buying a pair of glasses.
Just buy the glasses.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that. Interesting. Ahmed, if I can bring you in. So the internet expands. IoT becomes scaled across machines, across more and more business and domestic applications. What does that mean about industrialization, and how do we take full advantage of that?
Thank you. The IoT is already a concept we are familiar with in everyday life. So wearable devices and all these kind of things. So many people are already using IoT devices in a way or another. But the IIoT, which is the industry part of IoT, which if you like call it B2B type of IoT, they are more advanced, more security, compatible. Plus, they can provide more sophisticated type of data, connected data for us. And they are the basic cornerstone for Industry 4.0 because you need to connect devices. And the IoT itself is not, it just collect data and pass information to machines to make them more smarter and interacting with people. But it has an ecosystem, which is what is interesting to talk about. Ecosystem is business applications that you need to read the data and make sense out of this data and make decisions, informed decisions. Ecosystem include also business processes, which is extremely important to generate value for the whole business. And to give you example here, if you are able to read specific data for machines, for example, that will enable you to predict, for example, next time for maintenance. So instead of plant maintenance, you do predictive. Automotive, they use a robotic system heavily in their manufacturing. They need to deploy IoT in order to be able to predict certain malfunction or inefficiency or even maintenance needs. But on the process side, I can give you example, just real example. If you imagine a battery production system or a company that produce battery for automotive cars. So if you are using IoT, which mainly they are, you can simplify the process that used to be there from the supplier or manufacturer to the consumer. Because there are many functions, or many parts of the process are repetitive. So normally you inspect at the factory, you inspect at the consumer. Sometimes you need to eliminate people intervention to the whole process to make it more accurate. Some other time you want to use RFID, for example, and scan every battery coming out of the factory so that the customer can also trigger a process at their end, because the battery is used for something. So he needs to trigger a process and minimize the time of storage. So from factory all the way to usage. So there are so many advantage of pulling data out of IoT, analyzing, but also it is very important to reflect this amount of data we are able to read into your business processes and then generate value for business.
Can I ask you a question on that? So I run a business, I'm sure many people here do, and trying to remove inefficient cost, that's where you start every year. So if we take a 5-7 year view, so let's take Rish's 5 years, 2027. If there's $100 of cost in a business, how much do you think that form of automation, efficiency, reduces that 100? Does it half it? Does it take it down by 25%? Or is it a marginal cost reduction? And if it's a big cost reduction, if it's a step change, how do we ensure that businesses then take that cost out, but then redeploy it into further innovation rather than just further margin? Got a view on that?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very good example. The saving you are making is not marginal. It is massive. It is big. It is full transformation. When you digitize the supply chain, it is not only you save time, which is valuable. You also save a lot of investment you used to do, which are not needed, are repetitive. So you are able to run it digitally end to end, and you eliminate many repetitive work. And in some scenario, it is also in the safety side. So oil and gas, for example, they can deploy IoT in a place where it is unhealthy to put people, or it is so risky to put people there, and then you get into insurance and all these aspects. But on the industry specific or manufacturing perspective, if you combine IoT with ecosystem, with edge computing, where you push the processing close to the machine, and you connect it with 5G, for example, and technology that 5G is providing, like speed and latency, definitely the saving you're making is impressive.
All powerful points. Ala, can I bring you back in here? I mean, sparing your blushes, Mobileye have been, you've been at the cutting edge of deploying smart meters, industrial connectivity, new services. What have you learned that you can share with us?
No, actually, when it comes, no? Yeah.
Keep talking, it'll pick you up.
It will pick me up somehow.
Yeah.
Okay. So actually, when it comes to IoT, we're so proud that we have the largest IoT network, not in Saudi Arabia only, it's in the Middle East.
I think you get to say that again. Go on, say it again.
The largest IoT network in the Middle East.
Did everyone get that? The largest IoT network in the Middle East.
And we managed to close that project in 15 months.
15 months.
Took in Europe between 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And guess what? We did this during the pandemic, where chipsets was an issue, shipment was an issue, and even getting out to connect the smart meters was an issue. We're so glad that this project, the evolutions on that when smart meters, the efficiency that we're adding to our partners, the amount of reducing time, dramatic, and not only that, what you can build on top of that. We would like to connect everything, everywhere, period. This is something that's going to happen. Now we can do it. We're having today 10 million smart meters today connected in our network, 10 million. So this shows you how powerful is narrowband IoT. Because as long as the chipset prices go down, you can connect everything.
Yeah.
And that's create brilliant ideas for the people.
Now, Ricky, one of the great things about your life, which I remember a bit, is you get to go around the world. You get to go to different countries, and you can see countries that can do it in 15 months. I'm not asking you to name them. You can see other countries that take longer. So when you look at this issue of building base level, next generation digital connectivity, what are the 3 key lessons that Nokia would share with any country, any regulator, any politician, any corporate, that if you get these things right, you accelerate to the world that Rish is talking about faster and quicker?
Yeah, great question. I think first is reality is we live in a highly regulated telecoms environment, right? So our technology is regulated by standards like 3GPP. And so the role of the regulators and the governments is really important, because you have to bring the barriers of entry down to allow that investment to flow into a country. And I talked about this earlier. I think one of the key ones, of course, is things like spectrum. And I have to say, the regulator, the government here in Saudi did a fantastic job. That when allocating spectrum, it provided some concessions there to incentivize operators like Mobily to go and build networks outside of the dense urban environment. So those sort of progressive type thinking is really important, because you need to stimulate that. The reality is we work in competitive environments. Globally today, what we're starting to see is that most countries consolidate down to typically three mobile operators. We have smaller MVNOs, but the cost, the capital intensity of building these networks is massive. And so I think the real challenge for operators around the world is, how do I spend all that money, invest in building these networks, and still get value out of that as a return? So the real challenge for my friends in the operator side, and even for our business, is as traffic continues to grow exponentially, the revenue remains relatively flat, and so we have to continually drive down costs. So I think there's a real challenge for us here with regulators and governments around how do we equally share access to that technology and make sure that the companies who are investing in that technology get a fair return on that investment.
I have to confess, in one part of my previous life, I ran an auction for 3G spectrum, and which was very successful through the lens of how much money it raised. But at the time, all the bidders said to me, the real question is, what will be the economics of 3G? So what are the economics of 5G looking like, sitting here in 2022? What's your view on that?
I think the economics of 5G is very interesting, and actually I'll come back a little bit to the industrialization. I think this is the first G where we'll actually see it's going to be an enterprise-led technology evolution rather than a consumer-led. So, of course, 5G is great for faster mobile broadband. We can all watch our cat videos much quicker in high definition, and that's wonderful. Probably doesn't really help with productivity. But with 5G, what we are seeing, to my guests, my colleagues here, the earlier point is that we're applying this in an industrial landscape. So Bell Labs did some research that said today, as much as 70% of the world's enterprises are not digital yet. So we have a massive opportunity. But we're already applying 5G technologies in the enterprise world. And it even goes back to Shrish's world, is we are already doing some of that virtual world in the enterprise environments. So we have digital twins. So Lufthansa is working with Nokia on doing maintenance of aircraft engines from a desktop. You don't even have to go and look at the engine anymore. I've built a digital twin. You have augmented reality goggles and glasses, as Shrish said, where our technicians are out in the field doing this work with someone telling them remotely about what they see and how to fix problems. So I believe one of the big economics of 5G is going to be bringing the technology we develop in the enterprise actually into the consumer world, and the merging of those two will be quite different to the previous Gs.
Very interesting. Great to hear that Bell Labs is still predicting the future. Ahmed, can I ask you a question? If Ricky is correct, and certainly I can see a lot of sense in that view, if you look at all the industrial sectors, which do you think will be the top 3 leading sectors for 5G-led innovation? Will it be automotive? Will it be aviation? Will it be logistics? Where are you seeing, which sectors are you seeing the most innovation in the deployment of next generation connectivity?
It is really a difficult question to be clear, because many industries, they really need this kind of capabilities. But if we look to manufacturing, it is very, very, very relevant to manufacturing, because there are a lot of transformation and digitizing happening there. And the technology that 5G is promising, coming with like a slicing network, this is a quite unique feature that they needed, because they would like a sort of SLA in what they are doing. So if they build their full scenario, for example, innovative scenario to improve certain processes, From Industry 4.0 capabilities that we talk about, like IoT, edge computing, improving processes, all of them, they need a proper connectivity with high speed and high reliability, and also latency, low latency, which 5G are offering. So I see it very relevant, especially if these features are coming up, because they need the SLA. This is important. Apart from this, oil and gas, because they are heavily technology oriented, because the operation is quite massive and costly, and they afford this kind of latest technologies. But definitely this is relevant to other industries as well. My answer was more who is going to adopt it first, more than who need it more. But we need it in agriculture, we need it in healthcare, education as well.
So who's going to get there first? Give us your tip.
For me, at least in our region, I see oil and gas is going to adopt this technology faster than others, manufacturing second.
Very useful. Now, Rish, we're looking to you to predict the future again. If 5G is led by industrial innovation more than consumer innovation, how do we suck that innovation back into consumer applications? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. To Ricky's point, I think that there's, the digital twin technology that's being developed on the industrial side, in a variety of manufacturing processes and healthcare. All of those things, again, flow through to the consumer side, just in terms of, if you look at a company like Magic Leap that's, again, developing hardware and developing a lot of IP there in terms of what they're doing on the enterprise side, I think that seeps into, the hardware that's going to be coming out for consumers as well. So, I do agree that the military and industry is really innovating a lot in terms of the software, the hardware, and aspects of connectivity. But I also do think that there is this bottom-up approach that we've seen in technology over the last 10, 20 years in terms of consumers out there, whether they're picking up an Oculus Quest or playing a game, either a virtual world type scenario with Super World, where they're engaging with blockchain technologies, or they're engaging with AR, VR in a consumer sense. I think they become more comfortable than adopting that technology in their workplace as well. Yeah. And so I do think that both sides are converging. I do believe that a lot of the investment is going to the enterprise side, just because the form factor is still pretty expensive, for hardware, whether you're talking about AR or very, very high quality VR. But that price point is coming down. So, I do think that as we all realize that we have to be more virtual, and the last 2 years with COVID, I think we're becoming more comfortable with that. And so, as we in our daily lives are interacting with these technologies, whether it's AR, VR, whether it's blockchain and NFTs and all these technologies that are now coming to the forefront, I think we're feeding that to the corporations that we work for or engage with in our daily lives as well. So it's coming from both sides.
Do you know, a slight digression. Yeah. I remember years ago when I got my first iPad, I turned up at an Exco meeting. Interesting, this was at Alcatel-Lucent. And our technology team had said, no, you can't use your iPad for traveling. It doesn't pass the security thresholds. Yeah. And I said, well, I'm going to be using it. I turned up at this Exco meeting, there were 10 of us. 6 of us had iPads. So to your point about consumer behavior drives industrial change, can I ask you a regulatory question? Sure. Ricky made the point that one of the challenges for technology companies often is that regulatory environments are so varied. And actually, mobile's been pretty good at having standards, and Spectrum too, they've been pretty good at that. But in content and in applications and in human interactions, what's your advice to the regulators around the world and here in the kingdom? How do you regulate for the metaverse, or how do you not regulate for the metaverse? What's your advice on that?
Yeah. There's a variety of technologies, again, that come to play when we use the word metaverse, right? So first of those technologies is more immersive AR, VR. And again, there's aspects of that, as what we're doing with Superworld, that are very data-oriented as well. So permission use of data, data sovereignty, data integrity. This is where Web3 and blockchain really come to play. And then, there's digital assets. Like we do virtual real estate around the world where, literally anyone can buy any place in the world in Superworld, and they're buying digital assets, which are called NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and you'll get a share of any of the commerce. Now, all three of those technologies in that example, are likely going to be regulated in different ways. AR, VR, where you're wearing a headset, maybe, children shouldn't be, in those headsets at a very young age. Maybe some requirements about that would come into play. With Web3 and crypto, we've seen, a little bit of a sag in the market recently. So this kind of things becomes a little bit more important with people who are getting into those types of assets that might not completely understand, the ups and downs of a market like that. And then, again, on the data side, in terms of privacy, in terms of, the decentralized aspect of these assets, where you are really the owner of these assets. There's no centralized party that's taking care of those things. So it comes with a lot of personal responsibility. It comes with some privacy concerns. And so to answer your question, I think that regulators need to be very open for innovation to occur. And you see that in certain markets that are a lot more forward thinking, especially as we come to Web3, Switzerland and Singapore and places in the Caribbean that have kind of opened up and fostered some of this technology. And there's countries all over the world that are also opening up to this, including here and other places in the Middle East. And so, again, like Dubai, and I think that, opening up and fostering innovation is very important, but also providing everyone with that security, the trust of getting into these technologies. And so, a lot of that, I think Riyadh and Saudi Arabia can do a lot to educate people about these technologies, and this forum is a great way to enable people to understand, what's the best way to approach this. And at Superworld, we're really providing a gateway for people to enter the metaverse, and a lot of that's also education and also working with governments. Barbados, as an example, is building an embassy in Superworld. So governments are moving in. They're very interested in leveraging these technologies to provide the services to their citizenry around the world too.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I'm on to the last question because I'm getting a time indication. I'm going to switch subjects here. I'm going to switch subjects to healthcare, because on the point of access, internet for all, most countries around the world are wrestling with this spiraling cost of healthcare. If you're running a country, increasingly people are looking at healthcare costs taking 10, 15, 20% of GDP a year. What can internet access do to help countries and individuals just really significantly reduce that cost, but make world-class healthcare available to people? Because one of the other things that's rising fast is human longevity, technology innovation, pharma tech. I suspect many of us, if not all of us here, have been vaccinated or boosted. That was a very, very effective use of some very interesting technology in vaccine development at speed. So I'd be interested in your views. Is if we all want to take the benefits of longevity, what does internet access contribute to that by helping healthcare provision be more accessible and more affordable? Maybe start with you, if I may, Ricky.
Yeah, I think connectivity is absolutely key. We've seen that during the pandemic, right? The reality is that you can already interact with your doctor remotely, right? So you don't have to go and sit in a waiting room for 4 or 5 hours hoping to see somebody for a vast majority of applications. Over time, technology is going to continue to evolve, and I don't want to talk too much about things like 6G, but the reality is that as technology evolves, inside the home becomes the new frontier, and we'll be able to have sensors within the home to detect movement, to detect falls, to find out if someone's having a heart attack even. So technology will continue to evolve, and increasingly healthcare will be in the home and taking that burden away from hospitals. But you have to have that connectivity. That is going to be absolutely key.
Ala, do you agree with that? Can your smart meters become smart health meters?
No, I mean, technology is a vehicle to fix these kind of things. And I think it's very important to understand that we could reduce the cost. And as long as ecosystem can manage and the business can be profitable, people will jump to this technology. It's our role here to bring 5G as an ecosystem and to life. From vendors, creators, even chipset manufacturers.
Yep.
A lot of successful stories can die without this kind of calibrations. And I think 5G is ready for that.
And Ahmed, process innovation, I'm not being disrespectful to the healthcare industry, but process innovation in the provision of healthcare services, what advice can you give that industry on where they could lower cost and get closer to the patient quicker using connectivity?
No, I think the technology definitely, and we have seen example of this during the pandemic, how we leverage the technology. Ministry of Health, SEDAI, and other organizations help us to manage the pandemic through the technology and through the connectivity provided by telco. But on the wider scale, definitely the healthcare is one of the major industry that leveraging the technology. And I know I'm aware here in this country we are working on what is called a single unification of a patient record, which will connect the patient with all kind of medical centers, and also we have all information available wherever he goes. He's already identified. So the technology reduce in that way a lot of overlay, processes that we don't need it. So to pull the file from somewhere else and so on. So it is accuracy from one side, but also eliminate a human intervention to help the healthcare or health ecosystem to operate. Technology can eliminate many steps with the accuracy that we are expected, of course, with the technology of 5G and others to provide the connectivity needed. But I don't have an accurate number on the percentage of saving, but definitely it is also big in this scenario. Yeah, sure.
And Rish, last word to you. My doctor friends tell me that they've learned to live in dread when their patients turn up and say, Dr. Google tells me. What will Dr. Metaverse tell us? Will that get us there quicker and healthier?
Yeah, I think that accessibility is going to be really increased utilizing immersive technologies. You're going to be able to, have a real, immersive experience with a healthcare provider in your home that's going to feel very real. Haptics and other, other aspects of that technology are going to further enhance what a doctor can do in terms of, diagnosing a patient. But I also think that the data side is also a big part of this, being able to maintain privacy using the blockchain, being able to again utilizing AI in the home and in general in terms of diagnostics, to be able to in a telepresence type format be able to better understand what's happening with the patient. When we're creating a fully immersive world, there's a lot of ability to have that sensory information transmitted, and so that I think is all really going to be enabled with the metaverse.
Ala, and finally,
I think there is wonderful examples of when it comes to healthcare.
Yep.
And others, and you can see it in our booth here in Mobile, where we have brilliant collaborations between us and the healthcare. And I think Saudi Arabia couldn't pass this perfect pandemic, how we move on it with the positive feedback from everyone who's living in Saudi Arabia without the help of technology.
Well, that's a very great note to end on. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion. I hope you've got some new insights out of it. I hope you share the view of the panel that actually a lot of the innovation as a result of 5G connectivity is going to come from enterprises. And if we can harness that, then maybe Rish is correct, that by 2027, we'll all be here, maybe physically and also in presence as well. But could I ask the audience just to join me in thanking the panel. Ricky, thank you very much. Ala, thank you very much. Ahmed, thank you very much. And Rish, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.